What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of JaAR. JaAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe
and Amy
Review. This is our weekly show where we review the magic stories as they're posted on the Wizard's website. And this week, we are here for the finale of the Return to Dominaria story. And that is Return to Dominaria, Episode 12, For the Last Time by Martha Wells. My quick review at the beginning of this one, this was good. It's going to take you a long time to read it, but I still highly recommend that you do it. Because if you haven't done it yet, you're definitely missing out. This was a big one. This was the one that we'd kind of been hoping for weeks. And we finally got it. And despite my terror leading up to this story, with all the things that we still had to wait for, besides it taking a long time, I still think it was really, really good. So I highly recommend you go and read this, and then come back here and listen to our opinions of it and our review of it. What about you, Amy? What's your quick review look like?
Read the story first.
There you go. And in fact, to help you out with that, we have the link to that story in the description down below. So feel free to just scroll down, check the description, follow that link, read the story first, enjoy it, take some time. Like I said, it will take you some time. And then, of course, we would prefer if you came back here afterwards, but as we always say, here on this show, we review, we do not summarize. So it's better if you read the story first. We're not going to be able to cover everything that was in that story.
No.
So, onto the full review itself. I wrote some notes here before I started reading the story, and I want to read those notes off, because before this story began, here's what was in my head. Here's what this story had to accomplish, and I knew this before we even started reading it. We had 2 story spotlights that we still hadn't seen yet, out of 4.
Right. Half
of the story spotlights weren't done in the first 11 episodes.
Right.
Belzenlock, we had barely seen him, if at all, really at the tail end of the last one when Chandra and Gideon saw him, but otherwise, really, Belzenlock hadn't been around. Nicol Bolas, we hadn't seen him at all. He'd been discussed quite heavily. The Black Blade, again, discussed, not seen. We needed to say goodbye or find out what was happening next to Jaya and Karn, because we knew Teferi was getting oathed, which, by the way, right. Teferi's oath, also on this list. We knew Teferi was getting his oath, but Jaya and Karn, we didn't know what was going on with them. We knew Karn had been invited, but we didn't know if he was going to say yes or not. Jaya saying goodbye, and then literally the entirety of the new Weatherlight crew. Joyra, Tiana, Arvad, Shauna, Raph, Slimefoot, you know, everybody.
Right.
And then we had what was the cliffhanger from last week of the Yargle fight and the Whisper, pit situation that Chandra and Gideon were in. So that's a lot of stuff. So as I said, I was terrified going into this one, because if you guys have been following along with the Magic story for a long time and or with JaAR for a long time, you'll know that Eldritch Moon ended quite some time ago. And the final story for Eldritch Moon is one that we bring up a lot. And so if you're an old school fan of JaAR, you might be tired of hearing us talk about it, but I think it is an amazing example of
I'm tired of hearing us.
Yes. But I think it's important, because I think that story, which Emrakul Rises, I believe is the name of it, but I could be totally wrong. But you can go back and check it out. It's the final Eldritch Moon story. I don't encourage you to read it, but I encourage you to watch our video of it, because we enjoyed it. But that story had a lot to accomplish, and
in one story. And
they added in a bunch of extra stuff on top of it as well, and it was miserable.
Cluster.
Miserable. The things that they had to get done in that story, they threw in very quickly, glossed over a lot of important stuff, and then stuff that we didn't know was going to be in the story, they spent too long on.
Right.
And even if it was good, because there were some good moments in there, it detracted from the important things that we needed to hear and that we were looking forward to hearing. Right. So I was genuinely afraid this was going to be Eldritch Moon 2.0.
Yeah.
You know, the finale of Eldritch Moon 2.0. And I was pleasantly surprised. Very pleasantly surprised.
Me too.
This one was very, very good. And so to talk about it, to give it the time that it deserves, there was a lot of stuff here.
Yes.
at the end of last week, we talked pretty heavily about Yargle. Because I had made a joke 2 weeks ago when we were in the Slimefoot story that what the hell is this doing here? Hopefully we'll get back to it next week unless we have a Yargle story. And then Yargle shows up in last week's story, and again, I got to eat my words. And I say got to instead of had to because I was happy to do it.
Right.
Because Yargle did show up, but it was done very well. Yargle was this big, imposing, scary figure. Once again, learning from the mistakes of the past. They did not Brazella it, where Yargle just showed up and then got killed really quickly. Yargle put up a fight. Yargle got his licks in this story big time. And in the last one, he was pretty intimidating too, don't get me wrong. But they used him kind of as, again, a cliffhanger moment last week, and then brought him back this week. Again, that's the way to handle a meme character, a popular character that is popular just because people think that his design is cool, right? Knowing very little to nothing about the character as a whole, that is an amazing way to handle a character, good guy or bad guy, right? That was an amazing way to handle it. And they continued that this week. They did not disappoint. And again, I'm referring to Martha, but also the narrative team and the creative team that she worked with in creating these stories. So I really appreciated that. I don't know if you had anything to chime in on there or if that's kind of definitive in and of itself.
Yep.
But, and then to go with that, also last week I mentioned the fact that I really enjoyed once Chandra and Gideon went in one direction and the Weatherlight went in the other direction, I appreciated that they used the fact that there were two differing perspectives to show tension and to mount that tension and make you want to do nothing but finish that story.
Right.
Because this was a long story. I mentioned that already. And
a good way to say what that is, just plain good writing, which is so refreshing to say.
Yeah.
Because I feel like there's been so many weeks where I was like, it's just poor writing.
Yeah.
And I really did not want to see that from somebody like Martha Wells.
Yeah. This
was a big turnaround.
Yeah.
These last two stories.
Yeah. I think the word I would use is compelling. It was so
it's a good one.
Like meaty. You knew you wanted to know what happened next, and each change in perspective, sometimes when breaks like that happen and you're allowed to take a breath, you as a reader may want to put it down and go get a drink or go to the bathroom or get distracted, right, from reading the story. Nope. When that change in perspective happens, you're like, I need to know what happens next, right? Good books, good chapter books are like that, where a chapter ends and you're like, I can't stop now, right? A lot of avid readers will tell you, if they read before bed, it's sometimes a problem because if it's a good story, they're like, I can't stop now. I don't care if I have to wake up in 5 hours. I need to know what happens, So that's how I felt throughout this story.
I'm usually the opposite when I read before bed. It puts me right to sleep.
Well, and it depends on the story, right? Some people will say,
Not for me.
Fair enough. So it depends on the kind of reader that you are. Let's put it that way. So with this one, though, it did such a good job of making you not notice how long of a story it was. Because we were so interested in continuing. There wasn't a thought in my mind of, oh man, I should take a break. This is taking a while. Nope. I need to know what happens. I don't want to stop. I need to know what happens next. And so, like Amy said, that's a sign of good writing. That's a sign of good, not just a sign of good writing, a sign of good structure, of good pacing, right? You have all these moments, and it's possible that this story could have done all of the Chandra Gideon stuff first, and then once it got to the point where the Weatherlight was about to show up, cut to the Weatherlight and then do all the Weatherlight stuff, and then have them like in that combination point.
Okay.
And that would have been terrible, I think. Because I think it would have slogged. Like, it would still have been interesting, don't get me wrong, but those miniature cliffhanger moments are a great way to make you want to keep reading and find out what happens next.
As you said, compelling.
Yes. So very, very, very well done. Nothing but compliments from us on that part.
Yes.
And at any point in any of our videos, really, if you disagree with something that we say, please let us know in the comments down below. If you hated it, that it was cut up that way, let us know. If you weren't interested, if you weren't compelled.
Maybe it was too confusing or agitating that it cut it up that way.
I would love to hear other perspectives, because as you might be able to tell, we don't have that other opinion. And so hearing that other opinion helps us to kind of look at it from the other side and maybe see what you were thinking there. So if you're hearing us and you're like, I don't agree with that at all, let us know. Put it in the comments down below.
And tell us why. Don't just, say, I thought it sucked,
Yes.
Okay, elaborate.
Yes.
So we know what you're talking about.
Now, at the beginning of these Dominaria story reviews, we mentioned that we had been reading up on our last visit to Dominaria, namely the Time Spiral novel. And a big part of the Time Spiral novel, in fact, featured on the cover of the book, was Radha. You might know her from Dominaria as Grand Warlord Radha from the card, but she was in this story, and I have to say, yeah, it was, again, as people who read that story and know her backstory now, at least as much as was in that novel alone, it was a joy to read this story with her in it. And
because we weren't expecting to see her, at least I wasn't.
No, agreed.
So, like, for me, I was like, what? Radha's in it?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, people who love Radha might be kind of disappointed, though, that she wasn't in it more.
Fair.
But I was just happy to see her because I didn't think we were going to.
Right, and so, and so we got that little bit of a treat, and I feel like, I mean, there was a lot that I enjoyed about the Radha moments, including something that if you're not familiar with Radha, it may have been a cool part of the story, but it may not have kind of sparked joy in you and nostalgia in you like it did for us, because there was that moment where Chandra is fighting, I believe it was Whisper. It could have been just a regular cleric or Cabal agent, but I believe it was Whisper specifically, where Whisper is fighting back and then gets hit in the eye with a blade. And I think I picked it up a little bit before you did, but again, I'm the one reading it, so it's totally possible that I'm looking at it.
And you were like, you know what that is? And I was like, do I? Who does that?
Yeah. Along with Radha's sword that were from her grandfather or great-grandfather or whoever it is, or great-uncle or something, she is famous for her tear-shaped throwing knives. That's Radha's thing. She has a bunch of them. She made them by hand. Those are her things. And so when that knife hit Whisper in the eye, I was like, oh, it's Radha. That's so cool. So,
well, what you said was, you know what that is. And I'm like, who does that? And he's like, the tear-shaped blades. And I was like, she still has them.
So it's again,
she's here.
That kind of, right. So that kind of a moment for us, people who understand that, I can only imagine how many of those moments there were for people who are more familiar with more of the denizens of Dominaria, as opposed to us who are very familiar with Radha specifically. There was that Easter egg moment of like, oh, the tear-shaped blade's so cool.
Right.
Like, I am curious to hear what other people's favorite moments might have been with like a Teferi or a Karn, a Multani, Joyra, something like that, that you remember from an old story and that came up. Because even with people who were huge fans back in the day, like on Twitter and other things like that, I haven't seen a ton of that myself, just people talking about that, and that may very well be because, you know, they enjoyed it for themselves and that was kind of the end of it. But I wanted to share that because that was a joy for us to see something so small that someone who's not familiar with Radha, maybe you were not familiar with the Time Spiral novel, and so you were just like, oh, that's cool, she is a badass and saved them by throwing a knife through Whisper's eye. Well, there's more to it than that, and so not knowing her and not knowing her part of the story, that doesn't take anything away from your appreciation of the story.
But if it does, Tell us in the
Right.
comments.
I feel like it wouldn't take away from your appreciation of the story, excuse me, but it adds to our enjoyment of it as people who understand the backstory behind it, even though they didn't tell us that.
Yeah.
And so I really enjoyed that. I thought that was a cool thing to have noticed that other readers might not have, but that I don't think they would have looked at it and been like, why did that happen, right? Because it's just, she's a warrior, she's helping out, she's befriended Gideon, she then joins them after the fact as well, and they talk about her a little bit more, but that was kind of the big moment with her of, you know, her introducing herself to Gideon and then being able to throw that tear-shaped blade, because Radha's a badass, if you weren't aware. So, that was really cool. I appreciated that a lot. Speaking of Gideon, let's talk about Gideon for a second.
Oh no.
So, because we've been throwing a lot of praise around, so let's talk about a bit of confusion. And there's a lot of characterization discussion going on in the Vorthos community right now following these stories. A lot of it. And I encourage you to go look it up yourself. We will touch on parts of it here, but we do not have, you know, the end-all be-all of discussions on it, but, you know, I encourage you to look that up, look up the discussions on, probably on Reddit as well, and platforms such as that where people are going to be having that discussion. But let's talk about Gideon, because we talked about him a bit last week as well. Gideon gets knocked into the pit by Chandra because he has to be knocked into the pit by Chandra, because otherwise Whisper's going to know and try to kill them both, or, you know, tell all the Cabal members to kill them both. So Chandra, like, lightly pushes Gideon in, and Gideon kind of, whoa, and purposely falls in. And now Gideon's in the pit. And he realizes that he's being attacked now by all these people in the pit. And another...
He doesn't play an instrument, and they all do.
Wow. That was possibly
Really bad.
the geekiest thing that's ever been said on Geek for All. Well done.
You're welcome.
Very well done. Theater geeks, if you didn't get that joke. Anyway, so he gets knocked into the pit, and then another Cabal agent gets knocked into the pit as well. Gideon kind of hits the guy, knocks him out, whatever, and takes his blade, his sword. So now Gideon has a weapon because, again, he was disguised as a prisoner of Chandra, so he wouldn't have had a weapon to go in with, but now he does. He gets a weapon, and he recognizes, and this is the order that this happens in, he looks at his attackers, the people coming at him, and he goes, oh wow, these guys are all under dementia magic, because he tries to reason with them. And he's like, why are you fighting? Let's just stand here.
Right.
And he realizes that they're all crazy from dementia magic, so they can't, essentially they're not in control of what they're doing. And then he murders people. Yeah. Gideon just murders people. Now,
kind of violently, like, it, not just like murders, but like murders.
And now, here's the counter argument to that I can hear, hopefully some of you thinking up, because maybe you didn't think this was as big of a deal, that he was thrown into a pit. He's surrounded by rage-fueled people who are beyond saving. Most are members of the Cabal already, which they are attempting to eradicate regardless. And so they're not worth it. They're not worth saving. They're not worth not killing. And if Gideon chose to pull his punches, he might have been killed in retaliation, especially since he didn't want to use his magic in the pit, since he felt it would have made him a bigger target to the you know, big bads up top, like Whisper and Bells and Locke, etc. And I think that's a fair concern, that Gideon may have been like, this is my only decision, it's the only thing I can do, I have to kill these people, and then he killed them.
But that decision wasn't made. He just did it.
Yeah. And it wasn't shown, it wasn't discussed by him, it wasn't thought about by him. He just kills these people that are coming at him, and then he goes and joins Radha's circle of people. He finds that group and goes and is introduced to her and whatever. And again, it states that he murders the people that are coming up to Rada's group. He's stabbing them, he's slashing them, he's killing them. It seemed a little odd to me. And then, later on, when he finally gets the Black Blade, which, by the way, can we talk about how Gideon gets the Black Blade?
Yeah.
They're looking for the Black Blade. Chandra, Rada, and Gideon are looking for the Black Blade. That's like a part of the story. And they get to this corridor, and there's doors everywhere, and they're like, we have to hurry up. And it's a cliffhanger-ish moment, and then it goes back to the Weatherlight crew. And then by the time it gets back to Gideon and Chandra and Rada, Gideon just has the Black Blade. Yeah. It's just, like, casually.
Well, he found it.
Yep. Gideon's just carrying it. And I'm like, wait, he's carrying it? Like, why is he holding the Black Blade? And then like, well, he got it out of this one, the fourth room that they went into. What? Just, okay. And then Gideon makes a point, to go back to what I was talking about earlier, Gideon then makes a point of saying, like, oh, there's, he, like, waits for Chandra to burn these guys or whatever, because he says, I don't want to use the Black Blade now on these guys. So, now you have qualms about killing people. And again, sure, it's because the Black Blade is evil, and he doesn't want it to corrupt him, but he's still going to use it.
He doesn't want it to corrupt him, but he also, I mean, part of the reason why he didn't want to use the Black Blade in the first place was because it's a soul-eating device. It's a dark weapon that consumes the souls of its victims. And we find out after it's used on, I almost said Razaketh. Wow, long time ago. After it's used on Belzenlok, I've been doing this a long time. After it's been used on Belzenlok, we hear that, there's a new power that is, showing in the blade, because that's a pretty powerful soul for it to have drank. Right.
But still, it seemed so odd to me. And maybe I'm being picky.
Where it's just like he cares not at all about killing the people with any other weapon.
Despite the fact that he's Gideon and he totally cares about killing people.
Right.
Or not killing people, clearly.
And then just when it's the Black Blade, it really matters, and that's pretty much the only time.
Yep. Yeah, it was interesting. It was again, I think combined with Gideon's characterization flaws from the past 2 weeks, it confused me a lot here.
Yeah. Especially since, I don't know, there were a lot of instances where the characterization for Gideon almost felt like, it almost seemed like he was going a little black.
Right.
And so it would have made sense for those characterizations to have happened after he got the blade.
Mm-hmm.
But they happened before he got the blade.
Yeah.
And then in this story, he just has the blade.
Right.
And then he just is kind of still being that way. So it's kind of hard to say, oh, well, it was the blade, because it was poor characterization from the get-go, really.
Yeah, and we haven't heard from Gideon's perspective in terms of how he felt about the fact that Liliana was the one who dealt the death blow with the sword. We heard about Gideon's perspective in relation to Liliana, don't get me wrong, but not specifically about the blade. And that was something that I was curious about, since Gideon was the one who was like, I'll do this, I'll be the one to wield the blade, despite the fact that he didn't want to.
Right.
And then he kind of got his ass kicked by Belzenlok, but at the last moment, with his last-ditch effort, he dropped the sword, but it was in Belzenlok's thigh, and so Liliana grabbed it and finished the job, and we didn't really get to hear Gideon's opinion on that, and I don't think we ever will, to be honest, because I don't think that's going to come up. I think that Gideon and Liliana are going to have some other things to worry about the next time they see each other, so I don't envision that will come up, but it was definitely something I was curious about what he thought of that occurrence, especially because, like I said, of his trepidation with having used the blade. So
right, in that moment I was thinking about that, but shortly after that I forgot about it because so many other things happened.
Yes, agreed. Let's talk just for a second, really quickly. Let's just say that I think that this story definitively decided that Slimefoot is better than Yargle. Can we determine that? Can we say that that's true?
Yes.
Forget Muldrotha. Muldrotha who? Slimefoot is better than Yargle.
Okay.
That was fine. I was okay with that. I thought it was a little odd. It was a little weirdly placed. Where, like, last week it was like... I wrote the dude's name down because I'm not going to remember. Yixarid. Slimefoot just, like, looks over the edge and he's like, who are you? And they're like, who are you? He's like, I'm Slimefoot. And they're like, well, we're Yixarid and this person and this person. And so now Slimefoot's just able to look over the edge and go, hey, we need help. I'm friends with Yixarid. And then Muldrotha shows up. What?
Yeah.
That was so weird.
Yeah.
Like, sure. You know, if you want your Deus Ex Machina to be Muldrotha coming out of nowhere, bigger than Yargle, to show up, then fine. You want to get Yargle in there, you want to get Muldrotha in there, you want to get as many legendary creatures in there as you can, fine. Then you did it, Yargle and Muldrotha get in.
Boo!
It was fine. It was just fine. It was weird, but it was fine.
Boo.
Okay. Let's talk about Chandra.
Okay.
Chandra was a badass in this story. She was throwing fireballs with precision at everybody, right? She said to herself, I can't fight all these cultists. There's too many of them, you know, the Cabal members. There's too many of them, I won't be able to fight them. And then when she gets found out and tries to save Gideon by shooting the fire at Whisper, who's trying to kill all the people in the pit, all these Cabal members come charging at her, and she's just like, I throw fireballs at all of them. And she's able to precision, like, target each and every person charging at her with, like, a dozen fireballs.
Yeah.
And just hits them all in the chest, disintegrating some of them, like, when they get to the hallway where the Black Blade is in one of the doors, she just disintegrates the door, the chains holding the door, and all the spells around the door. Presumably she does it with each one, but we only saw it with one because then they flash back to him getting the blade. Whatever. But it's like... And then it mentions specifically, like, oh, wow, that training session with JaAR really paid off. It's like, yeah, you just turned Chandra into the biggest badass in the world with one fireball training.
Right.
One! Like, what the hell was that?
Dumb.
I was floored. I was like, okay, so yeah, that's cool. Chandra's just, like, perfect now.
Right.
Because she had one training session with Jaya Ballard.
Yeah, it was like the story's just, guys, I'm not coming with you because I need to get better. I'm going to track down Jaya Ballard. I found Jaya Ballard, but I'm mad at her for lying to me. Oh, well, Jaya Ballard's mad at me too. Oh, well, okay, we made up. Oh, well, okay, teach me how to do stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You taught me how to do stuff.
Just,
pow, pow.
Just like that. It was, I mean, that's
literally the story.
Yeah.
It's real dumb.
Yeah. Now, I've said this for a long time, starting really from, like, the end of Hour of Devastation and up through Ixalan as well. They're going to fight Nicol Bolas. And so you have to have moments where each of your characters get better than they were the last time they fought Bolas, because otherwise
they have
it's...
to feel genuine.
Trust me, I agree with you. It's just... So, Jace got an amazing moment, right? He got all of his memories back from training with Alhammaret, and became super powerful. And then we get to see how super powerful he is because he messes up Azor, an old walker who, granted, lost his spark, but still, in a mental duel with Azor, just decimates him, essentially. I mean, he doesn't kill him, if you're not familiar with the story. He doesn't kill him. He, like, wipes his mind and sends him to Useless Island to be the king of Useless Island.
Yeah. He Napoleon's that dude.
Yup, he sure does. History, not history. Sure.
Everyone knows that.
Sure.
Okay.
So
Let's move on.
I don't think you're wrong. I don't get it. So that was the Jace scenario, right? That happened over a long period of time, and then it's just like Amy said, she's mad at JaAR, JaAR's mad at her, JaAR eventually decides to train her because of her memory of Nissa.
I'm not making fun of you. I'm making fun of Chandra's story.
I mentioned Nissa, who is a better planeswalker than a Johnny is. But anyway, because they are friends, Chandra does something which makes JaAR like her, which makes JaAR willing to train her, and in one session, she becomes like the most powerful. Like I really don't know.
I think it was supposed to be a little bit of a time lapse.
It wasn't.
But
it wasn't. Maybe that closes the gap that everybody's upset about with the Jace being gone for months, but then showing up 3 weeks in, even though it was months. Maybe that's where that is. Chandra was just training that whole time, flying around in the Weatherlight. That's what it was. There, we solved it.
Teferi created time bubbles.
Nope.
Gave Jace lots of time.
Nope.
Gave Chandra lots of time.
Nope.
And gave everybody else no time.
Sure. We'll tell ourselves that. Okay. So now we have, I guess, talking about... Oh, all right. Let's intersperse some cool stuff. I appreciated the moment when Gideon shows up to fight Belzenlok, and Belzenlok says to Gideon, like kind of while sparring with him, he says, "I smell Planeswalker," which you did not enjoy that part, at least from what you said to me. I thought it was kind of cool. There was that moment of like Belzenlok kind of postulating like, "I smell Planeswalker. Who are you?" And Gideon having his 80s action movie moment of, "I'm Gideon Jura, and I'm here to kill you." And it's like... So, there's two sides to that. I thought that was somewhat cool.
No.
I thought that was kind of a cool moment. Amy did not.
I thought it was so dumb.
That's fair.
I was like, he sounds like a little kid, like on the playground, like, "I'm rubber and you're glue," you know, or, you know, just like some stupid thing to say. And then, you know, and then Gideon's like, "Well, I'm Gideon and I'm here to kill you because you're a bad guy." Thanks so much. Fascinating.
See, and I enjoyed it. So let us know. God, it's so funny. Let us know what camp you're in.
Only the story was.
Let us know what camp you're in, whether you agree with myself or whether you agree with Amy. That's really funny. So, okay. There was a weird moment in this story, and maybe I just don't get it. Maybe I'm missing something. I'm probably missing something. But could somebody explain to me, right? Gideon, Chandra, Radha, they're running through the stronghold. The Weatherlight is outside. There's fighting going on. Clashes. The story is really ramping up, and everybody is, like, fighting here and there. There's Panther Warriors. There's all this stuff going on. It's crazy. And then there are spirits as well, which we heard about. And one of the spirits flies up and tells Gideon that Belzenlok is that way. First of all, why?
Convenience.
Second of all, it's listed as a familiar bulbous spirit. What? Who? Who is this familiar bulbous spirit? It derailed the whole story for me because it was so amping up to something. We hadn't seen either of the story spotlights yet. It was over halfway through the story. We're really ramping up with all the fighting going on. It looks like they're all about to join one another. Both sides of the story are coming together in one point. And then there's just this bulbous spirit that tells Gideon that Belzenlok is that way, and it's a familiar bulbous spirit. And I'm sitting there going, who is it? What is it? Am I supposed to know?
It's the Gitrog monster.
Is it gonna tell me later? And again, if you know the story, if it's something that I'm missing, please, because I'm sure it has to be. Because they didn't talk about it again in the story. So it has to be something.
Never mentioned it again.
But Gideon's never been on Dominaria before, so who is it? I have no idea. None whatsoever. So I am flabbergasted. I had no idea what was going on in that part. I missed it entirely. And so again, if that was one of those Easter eggs that I talked about, like with the tear-shaped blade, this is an example of it not working. Because where the tear-shaped blade was like, oh, that's a pretty badass moment, and we were excited that it was a tear-shaped blade, here, some of you may have been like, oh, I totally know who that is. And Amy and I are like, who is it? Why are they there? What are we missing something?
Was.
So it took us out of it.
Well, when you said it, I was like, is it Slimefoot? Did Slimefoot die? And then he didn't. So I'm like, what? So what was that supposed to be?
And he said it was familiar to Gideon. So what is it? I have no idea. I have no idea whatsoever what it was, and I would love for someone to tell me, because I didn't see anybody talking about it today. I would love for you to please help me out here, please. I implore you, because I am flabbergasted. I have no idea. Then we get a little bit of a swerve, right? We talked about Teferi's oath. We talked about the fact that Teferi was going to take his oath. We knew it had to happen in this story,
right.
And it happened in a similar way to how it happened with a Johnny, I believe. Where it was either a Johnny? Yeah, it had to be a Johnny. He was the only other one besides Liliana. Where it happened similarly to the way it happened with the Johnny. With the original 4 Gatewatch members, and then Liliana as the 5th, they made a big deal out of the oath. Excuse me. And then with a Johnny and with Teferi, it was like, okay, we get it. Story readers, you know what the oath is. You've seen the card. You've seen the text on the bottom of the card that shows you what they say when they take their oath. So we're just going to tell you that the oath happened because you already know it happened, or it's going to happen. So the oath happens to the side. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know whether I feel that that's good or bad. I guess I'm okay with it. I don't know. I really don't know, because it's a big moment.
Sorry, I'm gonna sneeze. Maybe I'm not. I don't know.
Okay, it's a big moment, and I was really.
It's happening.
God bless you. I was really worried. Allergies, guys, terrible. Allergies are terrible for both of us. I was like, okay, it's got to happen. I don't know. Maybe I feel like there should be more to it. It should have more fanfare associated with it. I really don't know. God bless you.
They just should have given some time to it.
That's fair.
It really just felt like it was just inconsequential.
So let us know your opinions, because I feel like I can see both sides. As with most things, I can see both sides. I can see the fact that it's like, we get it, we know what an oath is. You don't have to show Gideon explaining what the Gatewatch is and explaining what the oath means, and then Teferi saying, this is what I will say. Like, I get that.
But at least, give Teferi anything that he's due in that moment.
Yeah. And he's a smart enough guy to be able to state something powerful and meaningful. Right. So I don't know. I really don't know.
At least give us a little bit of what was in his mind before taking the oath.
Right.
As if to say, that the oath even means something.
Right.
Come on.
And so, but in addition to that, so the reason I bring it up, 1, to talk about that, but 2, because we also find out that even though Teferi takes the oath, Jaya and Karn also join for the Bolus fight. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing that greatly.
Yes.
Now again, to me what that means is, and I'm sure that there's a lot that's going to happen in these stories on Ravnica, there's 3 sets worth of them, so I'm sure we're going to go real deep. Don't get me wrong, but with 3 sets on Ravnica, 2 full sets before we get to the big final showdown with Bolus and his team and his plans.
Please don't sing the song.
I actually wasn't going to. I don't know. To me, it seemed like that would have been a good opportunity for continued Chandra Jaya training, so that you didn't need Chandra to just already be the perfect badass now for this story. And now there's...
Super conveniently.
Yeah. So it's like, there's really nowhere else for her to... Can she get better? I don't see how, because she didn't show any faults whatsoever in this battle. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's just me. I think it's cool that Karn and Jaya joined. I really had no idea that they were going to. So I think that was a really nice addition. And I was definitely surprised. A lot of times it's like, oh, it's super predictable. It really wasn't. Because, sure, as you pointed out while we were discussing this earlier, what's Jaya got going on otherwise?
Right.
But she's also Jaya Ballard, and she's known to be opinionated and, you know, does her own thing. So I wouldn't have been surprised.
Old, like,
yeah, but still, I mean...
She doesn't have to be doing that stuff.
Right. And with Karn, it again, would have been perfectly acceptable for Karn to have said, screw you guys, I'm going to New Phyrexia. Right? Like, I would get that. I would fully understand that.
I mean, he wouldn't say that, but...
In not so many words, right? Sorry I can't come with you, I gotta go stop the Phyrexians, right? I would see that. I could see that. So that was something. But they go with them. And so there's that big moment of all of them individually, but basically collectively, planeswalking, but Liliana can't, and we finally get the In Bolus's clutches moment.
Yeah, but I don't know. I want to backtrack a
please,
bit.
Please.
Because they're going to join them, but again, that's another thing that felt like it was rushed through. Why? Like, you know, especially with Karn, I feel like they really should have actually explained why he's coming and, you know, what thought processes happened to get to that point. There were quite a few things that I still feel like were rushed in this story, despite the fact that we're saying, yes, the story's great, it's not Eldritch Moon, you know, I think that there still were definitely some things that were rushed because they wanted to place priority on other things, and they hadn't gotten so many things done before this story began. Okay. And, you know, I think that was one of them.
I don't know that I saw it that way specifically. For me, it was, maybe I'm giving too much credit because I'm assuming too many things, which means I'm kind of writing it for myself. But I just assumed that Teferi, who legitimately said that he has fought Bolas before and he understands that Bolas is a problem, that kind of Teferi's word alone and like Jaya backing him up, or JaAR backing him up, would have kind of collectively been enough for Karn to understand, like, oh, if Teferi has a problem with him, they're going to need my help, right? That's kind of what I thought. And then with the Chandra situation, that might be why Jaya came. So to me, again, I read those things into it. I will perfectly bow to the fact that it was not fully stated.
Yeah.
But I guess I made those assumptions that that's what that was, that that's why that was happening. So,
well, I feel like there are plenty of assumptions that can be made.
Fair.
But, you know, assumptions don't make a story.
Correct. Well, and that's why I said, you know, looking back at it, it seems like I'm writing that stuff in as opposed to that being what it actually is. So, again, let us know in the comments. Do you think that it was rushed? Do you think that you understand it and they didn't need to say it? What do you think? Or something in between. Two last things. First of all, like I said, they planeswalk. We have the In Bolus's clutches moment. I actually didn't have too much to say about In Bolus's clutches. I thought that it was well done. I thought that I was waiting for a little bit more explanation, but I think the flavor text on the card said basically that same thing that Bolas said. And so I don't think it needed a ton, and it didn't have a ton. I mean, there was that dread in Liliana, which goes to what I want to talk about last, kind of. Well, no, I guess we could talk about it now. It makes sense to talk about it now. Liliana had that dread moment, right? There was that joy in her. She even continued, and we talked about this last week, but she continued interacting positively with JaAR a lot this week.
Yeah.
Which I liked. I liked seeing that. And you know what's funny it makes sense because blue and red are Black's ally colors.
Okay.
And so JaAR being blue and red was good. It was good to see her specifically having such a relationship with Liliana throughout this, because I wouldn't see it.
Yeah.
You know, and I complained last week about that we had the discussion about show don't tell last week, and where we were told about their relationship, not shown, and yet this week we were shown, not told.
Yeah, but I also feel like that characterization was a little weird yet again. Like, a lot of those instances felt like they weren't Liliana.
Okay, and so that's the thing.
And I guess that kind of goes back to what Gideon was saying, like, oh, she's changed and like...
Yeah, and that's what I saw.
I don't know.
I saw the change. I did. And I think it's because she had that defining moment for herself of, sure, she killed her last demon, but notice what happened. When she killed her last demon, it wasn't, I'm going to kill you and my contract is done. It was, I'm going to kill you, you shouldn't have messed with my brother.
Right.
And she said it twice. We have complained in the past about repetition. Go back to the Ixalan stories and the Ravels of Ixalan stories. We complained about repetition. This time, it was only twice. It was noticeably repetitive, but it was necessary.
Right.
Because
that
it was
important repetition.
Yeah, because it was, this is for my brother. Because, and especially because we didn't think that it was a big enough moment when she killed him, her brother. And so, and yet those threads continued throughout all of these stories, even if it was just like lightly mentioned. This was that end moment for Liliana for the continuation of her story, or the finality of her story in this set of, I'm finally killing the demon, right? Sure, it's part of her pact. It's the last demon of her pact, but
they balanced it nicely with the fact that she was killing him also because of the fact that he turned her brother into a lich.
Yeah, and almost that was more so the reason at that time, which again, like Gideon said and like you pointed out, shows that she changed.
Right.
It's a way of showing that she's changed. And I liked it. I felt like it was a nice tie-in. I felt like it closed it nicely. And Liliana as a character was briefly redeemed, and then she had the rug pulled out from under her.
Right.
And for genuinely, I mean, Liliana said to JaAR, we couldn't have done it without you. If that's not a 180 from what Liliana was when we first saw her in Eldritch Moon, and I don't mean first ever, obviously I know, but in terms of the Gatewatch's story, when we first saw her in Eldritch Moon to now thanking someone, essentially, and not only thanking them, but saying, we couldn't have done it without you, that's huge.
Yeah.
What a huge moment. And now...
Well, but not only is that huge for Liliana, but, like, the fact that she said thank you was huge for her, but also the fact that, like, you have to consider, at that moment, she thought she was free from all of this.
Yes.
Finally.
Yeah.
Finally. She thought she was free from all of this.
Yeah.
So, I'm surprised she didn't do more to thank JaAR.
Well, and not only that, but, I mean, then you had that moment of, they're all together. Chandra, Gideon, Liliana, Jaya, Teferi, and Karn. They just said goodbye to the Weatherlight crew, which, by the way, sorry I didn't mention it earlier, Weatherlight crew staying together is awesome.
Yeah.
Combined with the fact...
that had a really nice tied-off send-off.
Yes.
It was beautiful and adorable.
And combined with the fact that Mark Rosewater has said, specifically in his Odds and Ends articles, but I'm sure also in other places, has said that it's now very likely that we will be returning to Dominaria again in the future, and again, seemingly, just like any other plane. I'm looking forward to seeing that group again. The new Weatherlight crew.
Right.
It makes perfect sense to me, and I love it. So that's really awesome. Sorry, I forgot to mention that earlier. But
I think it bears pointing out,
sure.
especially since Teferi is now part of the Gatewatch. I feel like it's that much more likely now that we'll revisit JaAR. I mean, they specifically said, Karn and Teferi specifically said that they were going to revisit JaAR.
Right.
When they had the opportunity to.
Right.
So.
And there's more to talk about with this, and it's not for this week, but also don't forget, though, despite the fact that Teferi is a member of the Gatewatch, we have heard that at the end of the third Ravnica set, that is the end of the Gatewatch's story. So who knows what that means? That's such a long way away. But back to this story, and back to Liliana. They say farewell to the Weatherlight, and the Weatherlight leaves, and now it's the Planeswalkers that are now going to go to Ravnica together, hail the conquering heroes. They killed Belzenlok. They're going to go to Ravnica, and Liliana even says, we're finally going to give Jace and Ajani the help that they asked for. They might not be happy to see me, but I'm going to go, to fight Bolas to help them. And everybody goes off one by one. She's super happy, and then Bolas shows up. And it was so good. It was so well done that she's on this huge high. She's actually got character development. She's been redeemed. She feels like a good person, I think. For once in her life, she knows that she's doing these things for the right reasons. And then Bolas shows up and he says, nope, you're working for me. And he takes her away. She hates it. She considers ending it.
Yeah.
Which is a very heavy topic, and we've talked about it before, and I don't really want to go into it. One, because I don't want to upset anyone, but two, because I don't think that it was discussed heavily enough in this story to warrant us talking about it. But I do want to mention that she is now the third, following Chandra and Gideon, who have had similar thoughts. And that's all I'm going to say about it. For this time, if it comes up again, we'll go further into it, and we will give the appropriate warnings beforehand. But this was such a great moment. And then to end it, because this was the Gideon Liliana set, right? We didn't hear a lot out of Gideon, and we had some issues with Gideon's characterization. Right. But the fact that this story, this set, ended with Gideon planeswalking back after realizing that she wasn't on Ravnica, planeswalking back after hearing from Jace again, who we will get to in just a moment. That's what we'll finish on. But planeswalking back, looking for Liliana, not finding her, and then noticing that she did leave, but that she didn't show up on Ravnica, somewhat proving Jace right. The next time that the Gatewatch and their friends see Liliana is going to be very, very interesting, and I pray that they do it correctly. Because that could be one of the coolest dialogue characterization moments that we've seen in a very long time, is redeemed Liliana, redeemed or newly powered Jace and Chandra and Gideon with the Black Blade on his shoulder meeting up, and what's going to happen? Is Liliana truly fighting for Bolas? Are they going to believe that she's not?
Right.
Because Gideon's going to come back, and they're going to have Jace in their ear saying, she betrayed you, I told you, you're naive, sorry, not sorry. And Gideon, at this point, from the way that the story ended, seems really defeated. I mean, he said, I want to see you again, but he feels betrayed.
Right.
He truly believes that she walked away and was not interested in them, and interested in staying with them and helping them.
I don't know that he truly believes that. I think a part of him believes that, but not fully.
I think he feels like he has to believe that.
Right.
Because there's nothing to the contrary.
He doesn't have a choice right now.
Yeah.
He's got to go back to Ravnica and, with his tail between his legs, basically. But I think also, that's another spot in the story where I wish that they had taken a bit more time, because I think Liliana kind of stayed behind last
Mm-hmm.
For certain reasons. And I really thought that they were going to get into those.
Like that it was her home plane and she was leaving it again.
And it was like a really, really deep amount of closure for her in her life. So it would have been a huge turning point, I think, for her character.
Interesting.
And they just kind of glossed over that. They were just like, oh, well, she waited around a few seconds so that she could be captured by Nicol Bolas.
Well,
you know, like...
Well, no, she couldn't planeswalk away, and I don't know why.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's true.
But she did say, it did say in the story, that she intended to follow Gideon.
Right, and
Gideon was the first one to go.
Right, and she waited until the last person went, and then she tried to planeswalk and couldn't.
Well, no, so that's why I was a little... I interpreted that differently than you did. The way I heard it was, or read it was, she intended to go after Gideon, and it didn't really work, and so while she was trying to planeswalk away, she saw everybody else go, Chandra and Jaya, then Teferi, then Karn, and then she tries again, and then tries again, and that's what happens.
See,
then she
I saw it as 2 attempts. One...
After everybody left.
After everybody left. And a second one after that, when the first one didn't work.
Okay. And I saw it as 3.
Okay.
One right after Gideon, and then the last 2 at the end. So I don't know. Who knows?
So maybe you guys can weigh in here a little bit, because it sounded to me like it was going to amount to something. Like, okay, she was intending to go right after Gideon, but she didn't, because she wanted to stay and just have a few minutes to herself on her home plane that she was eager to leave, but she wanted to give herself the closure that that moment really should have given her. And so it would have made total sense to me for them to go right into a part where they explained all of that. And so when you said that she had intended to go right after Gideon, that's what was going through my mind. Like, oh, okay, we're going to get to see a nice, decent chunk of characterization for Liliana now, because we're going to see how all of this has affected her.
Yeah.
And we didn't get to see any of that, because then it was just like, she just, at that point, watched everybody else planeswalk, attempted to planeswalk herself without giving herself that closure, and then couldn't, and then attempted to again and still couldn't, and then realized, oh, Nicol Bolas is here, and I don't have that closure anyway.
Right. And I like your way better, because it kind of goes along more with what I was saying earlier about the end of her arc and all that other stuff. I still don't see it that way, but I like your interpretation of it better, personally.
Well, it's just that when I was in the headspace of listening to that portion of the story, that's what was going through my mind. Like, okay, that's what's going to happen next.
Right.
And it just didn't.
Right.
And I was like, okay, maybe that is because they wanted to show that there actually isn't any closure there, because her pact is still a thing now.
Mm-hmm.
Nicol Bolas is still a thing now.
Mm-hmm.
She's still being controlled now. She's not going with the Gatewatch. She's going wherever Nicol Bolas tells her to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't know. I think it would have been more meaningful had we gotten to see that stuff go through her head and then have it crash, you know, have it all come tumbling down when she sees Nicol Bolas. That moment could have been so much more dramatic and realistic and thought-provoking and emotional, and it wasn't any of those things, really. It was just like, oh yeah, this.
That's fair.
We knew it was coming.
That's fair.
Yes, we knew it was coming, but you could have made us care. Just saying.
That's fair. That's fair. So I wanted to end on one last discussion, real quick. First of all, I realized I mentioned to Johnny earlier and didn't properly dictate that he is not as good of a planeswalker as Nissa is. So I apologize for that. So sorry, everyone. But I wanted to end on talking about Jace.
Because this is the second time in the Dominaria stories that we see Jace. And both times, he is doing the same thing. And the first time that we saw Jace on Dominaria is when he planeswalks onto the Weatherlight and basically shows up, throws shade at Liliana.
Right.
No pun intended. Liliana loves her shades. But throws shade at Liliana and then basically says, like, the rest of you coming with me? And they're like, but we're here helping her. And he's like, fine, whatever. And he leaves. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people on the internet specifically, because obviously where else am I referring to? A lot of people in the Vorthos community had issue with Jace's characterization. I want to give my opinion on this because we do Vorthos shows, and I'm going to go ahead and show off my...
#Vorthos Pride.
By saying that I very respectfully disagree with people who think that that is not correct characterization for Jace Beleren. And I will say why. And I think I've said it before, but if not, here is me definitively saying it. This is a new Jace Beleren. We don't know this Jace Beleren because he's a Jace Beleren that we have never met. Because he is Jace from Alhammaret's training that he now has back in his head. And he was trained. Think about how much of a jerk Alhammaret was.
Right.
And that's essentially who, in terms of his powers, that's who raised Jace. So think about that. And then think about the fact that Jace just went through such a traumatic experience for himself. And I don't even mean the head trauma and the loss of his memory. I mean the fact that he just had to wipe the memory of, essentially, arguably, the woman he loves.
Yeah.
And he had to look her in the face, wipe her memory, and then hide as she went to go join the enemy that he most recently faced who attempted to murder him and his friends. And so Jace is now looking for someone to blame, as anyone would in these terrible situations that he's been through. And he's gonna blame Bolas, sure. But at the same time, he has also learned through meeting Vraska as true Vraska, how he met her in Ixalan, or on Ixalan, he is learning who Liliana is as a person. And he's learning that she is not a good person. And that the relationship that he had with her was not a healthy relationship. And now he has the power to see that, and he's not that scared little insecure boy anymore. He's powerful now.
He's been through the trauma of, as you said,
Mm-hmm.
but he's also been through the trauma of finally figuring out that he has been abused his entire life.
Yes. Yes. By Liliana in their relationship, by Alhammaret when he was with Alhammaret.
And so now, as you said, he has the power to try to do something about it. And now he's a lot smarter because he realized that that was the case. And before, the Jace we knew, the only Jaces we ever knew, were victims. And this one is not. He is someone who's lived through the trauma and is going to come out on the other side now. So.
And is he brash? You better believe it. He is very vocal, and he should watch himself, right? Because at this point, when he showed up, Gideon was trying to plead with him almost, being like, Jace, come on, man, you don't understand. Same thing with Chandra. She was like, come on, Liliana helped us. And even Teferi was like, I don't really know what you're talking about, man. She had lots of opportunities to betray us, and she didn't. She was right there with us, helping us. Jaya said she saved Joyra, but then Jaya snapped back. Everybody else was trying to be nice about it, and they were like, come on, Jace, this isn't cool. Jaya she's a Spitfire, right? This is her, she's red. And so she's not going to take it lying down. She looked at him and she said, "Don't call me naive, boy. Jaya's not young. And Jaya's been around, and Jaya's not going to take that crap." And so Jace needs to be somewhat aware of who he's around and realize who his allies are and who his enemies are. But this is why I say, I don't think that this was incorrect characterization for Jace.
Certainly not.
Either of the times that we have seen him in the Dominaria stories. That's my opinion, and I don't... In no way am I saying that the people are necessarily wrong. I think every person who has stated an opinion is entitled to it. I'm not sitting here being like, everybody's wrong and they suck. No. People are very opinionated about Jace. And I have very infrequently, I think, agreed with people who have had opinions on Jace, because the opinions in the past were that he was boring and he was milquetoast and all this other stuff. I don't know. I guess I agreed to a degree, but here I don't agree that his characterization when we saw him on Dominaria for the brief stints that we did were incorrect characterizations. I thought that it made perfect sense to me, and I think that I'll be interested to see whether they go back on that in the Ravnica stories, and if they do, I will be interested to see whether that was their intention all along and that it was just a little heavy-handed in the way that Martha wrote it, or if they go back on it because of the backlash from the fans following these stories.
They better not go back on it.
I agree.
That would not make any sense.
I agree. I do, because again, as I said, obviously I think it is warranted. But
this characterization is correct. As someone who has been through that kind of a thing, I can say that that characterization is correct. It's a shame that it was so short and abrupt, and we didn't get to actually have it. It was just, he shows up, oh, don't trust her because she's a piece of shit. Okay, we're gone again. Hopefully, on Ravnica, we'll get to see the actual characterization there, instead of just a glimmer of it. And perhaps at this point, they're trying to say that he's so above it all at this point, that he's not even wasting his time trying to convince them all that Liliana is a bad seed, or trying to tell Liliana how wrong she is, you know, and he's just trying to do what he knows has to be done and focus on that and do it. But there's a lot of characterization and dramatic stuff that could happen as long as they actually do it, which means that they'll have to not be afraid to actually do it.
Right.
And Martha was not afraid to actually show Jace as he should be in this story, which is, as you said, very brash. Because when it comes to Liliana, he is straight angry. Nothing else. Traumatized, pissed off, and all he knows is that she has done nothing but manipulate and waste his time for way too long. And that's time that he didn't have, because now he's got to pull out all of the stops and just be able to fight Nicol Bolas. And yes, he's going to have help from the other Gatewatch members, but not really from Liliana, because he already knew that she wasn't actually going to be helping.
Right, and I mean...
Which is why his point was, don't trust her, of course she's not here.
See, now, the interesting thing is, with the kind of the last thing that you said, because everything else I 100% agree with, but with the last thing that you said, I think he's correct, but I think he's correct not for the reason that he thinks. She was obviously fully intending to join them It just turns out that she didn't because Bolus showed up. And again, hopefully they'll realize that, but I think that, I think that at the end of this story, today's story, and at the end of this set story, Jace is right. And I think once Gideon gets back, and we may not see that exact moment, but I don't think we have to. Once Gideon gets back from having gone back to Dominaria to check on Liliana, everybody else is going to know that Jace is right too. And again, is he right? Yes and no. He's not right that she was never to be trusted and that she was always going to betray them, but in their eyes, he's 100% correct now.
Right.
She was there, she was going to leave with them, and then she left and didn't show back up on Ravnica. So...
And as somebody who has spent lots of time with her and been through a lot of stuff with her and been betrayed by her before and been manipulated nonstop by her, it makes perfect sense for his reaction to be that at this point. Mm-hmm. Now that Vraska has helped him to see that that's all she really was.
Yeah. An abuser.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So even if she has had a total change of heart, it doesn't change the fact that that's what she was to him. So I don't see them making up anytime soon.
That's fair. That's totally fair. And I mean, again, we've got 3 Ravnica sets for that. But that is for another time. This lovely note that we have ended it on is where we will end it. Next week, it is my aim, it is my goal to wrap up the Dominaria stories, our feelings on it overall, our feelings on the kind of meta aspects outside of the story itself. There's some other things that we'd like to talk about, but I think we wanted to give this story its time. As we always say, this story deserved its own time, and we can talk about all that other crap because there's plenty of it. Next week, I assume, is when we will be getting the Battle Bond background information that we were promised by Allison Lures. That's when I assume it's coming out. That's what makes the most sense to me. If that's the case, we might push that off a bit. We also want to talk about the Magic Story podcasts and going in depth on Dominaria. We might do individual ones, or we might do one big one for all of them. I haven't really decided yet, but for next week, I'm hoping, unless there's something crazy that pops up that we weren't expecting and weren't ready for, I think next week is going to be our Dominaria wrap-up, where we kind of close this chapter for ourselves. I
get the closure that Liliana needed.
There you go. Totally.
But not the closure that Liliana deserved.
Yes, thanks, Batman. So that is where we're going to leave it this week. I can't quite see the timestamp on the camera. I feel like this was a long one, so if I'm correct, I think it was warranted with the story. But thank you all for sticking around. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you have some opinions to leave us in the comments down below. Let us know your thoughts, your feelings, your opinions. Feel free to share this with your friends. That helps us out quite a bit. As well as if you click that subscribe button up top, you'll find out when all of our videos come out. Once again, that helps us a lot. And we can get this to more people. We can get more voices and opinions. Of whom
leave information in the comments. Any questions that we've asked you during the video, any comments that you would just like to make on either what we've said or in contrast to what we said. It really does help to have that in the comments and start a conversation among all of you and including us. Mm-hmm. And it really just helps to have your insight for the next episode.
Mm-hmm. So, and we appreciate any and all of you who have done that all throughout these last 12 episodes of JaAR, episodes of Return to Dominaria. So, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for writing those things in the comments, for joining us, for sharing these videos out if and when you do. Like I said, we really, really appreciate it. And it is a way for you to join us in showing off our
Hashtag Vorthos Pride.
Had to do it twice. It was the last one. Thank you guys so much once again for watching another episode of JaAR here on Geek for All. We hope to see you back next week. I have been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And as we always say, guys, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.